we are looking at these quadratic equations. We're going to solve them with the quadratic formula, but they're going to come up with some negative answers. And from there, we're going to make sure we use I when we have a negative underneath the square root. Okay? So we're going to go back to that quadratic formula, and I'm just going to write it right here at the top. It's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? So in this case, a is 10, b is negative 4, and c is 10. So we're just going to plug it in, and this is how we're finding the roots or the zeros or the x-intercepts. So we're going to say 4, because a negative and negative makes positive, plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 10 times 10 all over 2 times 10. I'm going to show you. Let me know. This is the reason we end up doing imaginary numbers and complex numbers in the first place. Okay. So I'm gonna do what's underneath the square root sign first. So I'm just gonna have the 4 and plus or minus right here. But 4 times 4 is 16. It doesn't matter that it's negative, because a negative times negative is a positive. 4 times 10 times 10. So 4 times 10 is 40, and 40 times 10 is 400. So we get minus 400 all over what's 2 times 10? 20. Okay. What is 16 minus 400?
384.
Is that true? It is 384. Negative 384 over 20. Okay. No, he just subtracted 16 from it. Okay. So we cannot have a negative answer here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, 4 plus or minus, and I'm going to bring an I out. So that's a negative 1. Square root of negative 1, 384. Now I need to think of what is the biggest number that goes into 384 evenly that is a perfect square. So 100 doesn't go in there evenly. $384. Remember, we're looking at perfect squares. So I tried like 100 won't go in there. Will 81 go in there evenly? No. Will 64 go in there evenly? Yes. So square root of 384 becomes 6 times 64. What is the square root of 64? Okay, so 8 square root 6, that replaces the square root of 384. So I have 4 plus or minus 8i square root 6 over 20. I'm sorry, I cannot hear somebody asking a question because other people are talking for some reason. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Perfect. So now I'm going to take 4 divided by 20. That gives me 1 plus or minus, well, I know that 1 over 5 plus or minus 8 divided by 20 gives me 2 over 5. So it's 2i square root 6 over 5. So I literally just took these as fractions and did them. And you could say 1 plus or minus 2i square root 6 over 5. Yeah. Okay, let's try a couple more of those so we kind of get used to that whole I being there and we remember how to reduce square roots and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Yep. 2i square root 6 over 5. So that you could write it either way. This is separated, this is together. Either way is correct. Stop talking or making noise in my classroom unless you need to go to ISS. So 8 divided by 20 is 2 over 5. Yep, just reduced that fraction. Okay, let's look at number 2. A is what here for number 2? 1, good. What's B? And C. Okay, so we're going to put negative B, so that's positive 6, plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12, all over 2 times 1. Okay, now I'm just going to bring that 6 plus or minus down. What's 6 times 6, guys? Okay, and then 4 times 12 times 1 times 12 is negative 48. All over 2 times 1 is 2. So 36 minus 48 gives us what? Negative 12. Okay, so we've got a negative inside my square root again. So we can take out that negative, but then we have to put an I on the outside. Okay, now what two numbers multiply to give us 12 where one is a perfect square? 6 and 2, neither of them are perfect squares. Nope. 4 and 3. And the square root of 4 is 2. So we get 2 square root 3. So I have 2i square root 3. Now my last step is just to reduce. How many times does 2 go into 6? 3. Plus or minus, how many times 2 divided by 2 is what? 1. So it's 3 plus or minus I square root 3. Shh. Maybe if you paid attention and wrote something down, you'd learn something. I'm just asking you guys to write this down. Yes. Yep. So literally I'm like reducing this fraction, 6 divided by 2, and then I'm reducing this fraction, 2 divided by 2. I square root 3. Okay. Let's just do a couple more and then you'll just have the back for homework. Okay? So on the back there's just 6. So let's try to get these 4 done in class. All right, what is A? What is B? And what is C? Okay, so let's plug it in. What do we get? A negative and a negative makes a, so it's 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 2 times 5. Good. Okay, I'm just going to bring the 2 plus or minus down. And negative 2 squared is? 4. And then 4 times 5 times 5. Yep. So it'd be negative 100. All over, what's 2 times 5? 10. Okay. So we get 2 plus or minus the square root. What's 4 minus 100? All over 10. Okay, again we have that negative, so we can think of bringing that I out. So we've got 2 plus or minus I, and it's over 10. And now we've got the square root of 96. So what's the biggest number that is a perfect square that goes into 96? Well, I know 81 doesn't go in there evenly. 64 doesn't go in there evenly. 49 doesn't go in there evenly. 36 doesn't go in there evenly. 25's not going to work. 16 goes in there 6 times. So the square root of 96 is the same thing as 16 times 6. And what is the square root of 16? 4. So we're going to have 4 square root 6. So it's going to be 4i square root 6. And now we just need to reduce. 2 over 10 becomes what? 1 over 5. Good. Plus or minus 4 divided by 2 is just 2i square root 6. So that's my answer. 4 over 10 reduces to 2/5. 2 over 5. Okay, let's do one more. What is the A for number 4? What is the B? Okay, so let's set it up. What do we get? Okay, so I'm going to go 3 plus or minus, bring it down, and then what's 3 times 3? 9. And then 4 times 4 is? Times 2 is? 32, good. And 2 times 4 is? 8. Okay, so now we're going to go 9 minus 32, and that gives me negative 23. So it's 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 23 over 8. So see how I have that negative? I've got to take an I out of there. So I get 3 plus or minus I. And square root 23, is there anything that goes into square root 23? Nope. So it's just square root 23. And that's our final answer. Now remember, that plus or minus means there's 2 answers. There's 3 plus I square root 3 over 8, and there's 3 minus I square root 23 over 8. That plus and minus means there's 2 answers, so there's still 2 roots here. Okay, there are 6 problems on the back, but they're just like that. You're just going to put in that Pythagorean, that quadratic formula, and you're just going to take out an I if it's negative, and you're just going to simplify that square root. Manny? So it's not going to work because it's going to tell you that there are no real roots. Okay? So you can do each of these parts separately. Like you could literally put this whole thing right here underneath the square root sign under it, and that would take you down to negative 23. So it skips some of the steps. But you can't put the whole thing together in there because it'll say no real roots. And it won't give you the answer. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, I do have the calculators open so that you can use it for this. I know some of you are really struggling with reducing fractions. If you make them separate and put them in the calculator, it'll do it for you. Okay, so you've got 6 problems to try for your homework, right? If you have any questions, please let me know.